Light is a fundamental concept both physically and metaphorically. It's not just about illumination in the literal sense, but about clarity, vision, and the ability to navigate a world that is often obscured by darkness, confusion, and uncertainty. When the psalmist declares that the Lord is my light, he is making a profound statement, one that suggests an entire framework for understanding how we should orient ourselves in the world. We are creatures who strive toward order amidst chaos. When we wake up in the morning, the day ahead is largely unknown. There are problems waiting for us that we haven't yet encountered, situations we will have to manage, decisions that will have consequences. It is easy to feel overwhelmed by this uncertainty, to feel as if we are standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable. But there is a choice in how we approach it. We can either walk blindly hoping things turn out well, or we can seek a source of light that clarifies our path, that makes the unseen visible, that reveals the right steps to take. Light in this sense is about wisdom. It is about truth. It is about understanding the deeper structure of reality so that we do not become lost in the difficulties of life. And if we lack light, if we fail to seek it, what happens? We become confused, we stumble, we make decisions based on fear or impulse rather than reason and discernment. We become reactive instead of proactive, responding to situations in ways that deepen our suffering rather than alleviate it. There's something to be said about how we derive meaning from clarity. If we take a step back and examine human nature, we recognize that people thrive when they have direction. When we are able to see the road ahead, even if it is a difficult one, we can move forward with confidence. But when we exist in a state of uncertainty, when we don't know where we are going or why, despair sets in. This is why those who lack a sense of purpose often find themselves lost in a kind of existential darkness. Now, what does it mean for the Lord to be our light? It means that there is a moral and spiritual structure to reality. And aligning ourselves with that structure brings illumination. There is a reason why across cultures and traditions, wisdom is associated with light. Those who seek truth, who align themselves with what is good and just, begin to see more clearly. Their actions are more purposeful, their decisions more precise. They avoid unnecessary suffering because they are not groping around in the dark, making mistakes that could have been avoided had they sought wisdom in the first place. Think about what happens when you turn on a light in a dark room. What was once hidden is now revealed. You can see where to walk, what to avoid, what needs to be addressed. This is what happens when you start your day with truth, with wisdom, with the acknowledgement that there is a guiding force beyond yourself. Instead of stepping blindly into the day, you move forward with an awareness of what matters most. The modern world presents an interesting challenge. There are so many competing sources of information, so many voices claiming to offer clarity that it becomes difficult to discern what is truly light and what is merely distraction. People often chase things they believe will bring them fulfillment, only to find themselves more lost than when they started. They pursue status, wealth, approval, believing these things will bring them peace, but in the end, these pursuits often lead to greater confusion. The only way to truly see is to ground oneself in something beyond the transient, beyond the shifting opinions of culture or the fleeting satisfaction of material success. There is something deeply stabilizing about beginning the day with this mindset. Imagine waking up each morning and orienting yourself toward truth before anything else. Before the emails, the obligations, the pressures of work and relationships, you acknowledge that there is something higher, something that provides real clarity. This simple act changes how you engage with the world. You are less reactive, less prone to anxiety, because you are not navigating blindly. You have established your foundation before stepping into the chaos of daily life. This is not to say that life will be without struggle. Even when we walk in the light, challenges remain, but the difference is in how we face them. A person who starts the day with clarity is prepared for what comes. They are not easily shaken. They are not easily deceived. They recognize falsehood when they see it because they have spent time in the presence of truth. They know where they are going, and because of that, they are not paralyzed by fear. And so, if there is one practical step to take from this, it is this. Do not begin your day in darkness. Do not reach for the distractions, the noise, the things that cloud your mind before you have even had the chance to establish clarity. Start with light. Start with wisdom. Start with the kind of truth that provides real direction. Because when you do, you will see. And when you see, you will know where to go. And when you know where to go, you will move forward, not in fear, not in confusion, but in confidence, knowing that the path ahead is illuminated. Salvation is an interesting concept. It's often thought of in terms of eternity, some abstract idea about what happens after we die. But that's a narrow way of looking at it. If salvation were only about the future, it would have little relevance to the difficulties and struggles of the present. And yet, the psalmist says, "The Lord is my salvation." That's not a future tense statement. That's present. That's immediate. That means salvation is something happening right now, something active, something that can fundamentally shape the way we live our lives. So what does it mean to be saved in the present? What are we being saved from? That's a question worth considering seriously, because most people, whether they realize it or not, are looking for salvation in one form or another. They might not call it that, but it's there. Look at the way people behave. They seek security. They seek comfort. They seek something that will pull them out of the chaos of their circumstances and provide stability. Because life is difficult. It's suffering. And without something to hold on to, without something that provides a sense of order and meaning, people are left flailing, desperate for anything that might make things feel manageable. The problem is that when people don't recognize the true source of salvation, they look for it in all the wrong places. They think they'll be saved by money or by success or by the approval of others. They think if they can just climb the social ladder, if they can just gain enough power or influence, then they'll finally feel secure. But that never works. You see this all the time. People who reach the top of whatever structure they were climbing, only to find that it didn't give them what they thought it would. They still feel just as lost, just as anxious, just as uncertain as before. In some cases, even more so. Because now they don't even have the illusion that salvation is still ahead of them. They've gotten everything they thought would save them, and it didn't work. That's a terrifying realization. So then, what does it mean when the psalmist says, "The Lord is my salvation"? It means that salvation isn't something we manufacture. It's not something we achieve. It's not something that comes from external success. It's something given. It's something received. And it's something that transforms how we experience reality itself. Because salvation isn't just about being rescued from suffering. It's about having the ability to face suffering without being destroyed by it. It's about standing in the middle of the storm and knowing that you won't be overwhelmed. There's an idea that emerges throughout history in philosophy, in religion, in psychology, that human beings need something beyond themselves. You see it in the way people attach themselves to ideologies, to political movements, to relationships, even to destructive habits. They are looking for something to put their trust in, something that will give them a sense of security and purpose. But when you put your faith in things that are unstable, things that shift and change with the whims of culture or circumstance, you will always end up disappointed. That's why people cycle through belief systems so quickly. They jump from one ideology to another, from one self-help method to the next, from one relationship to another, always looking for something that will finally make them feel safe, make them feel whole. But real salvation, true salvation, is not found in those things. It is found in something unshakable, something that does not change based on how you feel or what happens in the world around you. That's why the psalmist's declaration is so powerful. The Lord is my salvation, not success, not pleasure, not human approval, not the things that can be lost in an instant. The foundation of security is not built on things that are temporary. It is built on something eternal, something that cannot be taken away, something that remains firm even when everything else collapses. When you understand this, it changes the way you live. It means that when hardship comes, you don't have to be afraid. It means that when people reject you, it doesn't break you. It means that when you fail, because you will fail, it doesn't define you. Because you are not relying on yourself for salvation. You are not placing the weight of your security on things that cannot bear it. Instead, you are anchored in something far stronger, something that does not waver. This is what allows people to endure suffering with dignity. This is what enables people to continue moving forward when life gets unbearable, because the truth is, life will bring moments where you don't see a way out, where the weight of everything feels crushing, where you are so lost in the darkness that you don't know if you will ever see the light again. And in those moments, if you have placed your trust in the wrong things, you will collapse. But if your salvation is grounded in something immovable, you will stand. Even in the worst of circumstances, you will not be overcome. This is not a passive thing. It's not a matter of just sitting back and expecting everything to be easy. It requires an active choice, a daily decision to put your trust in something greater than yourself, to acknowledge that you are not in control of everything. And that's okay, because real security is not found in control. It's found in surrender. And that kind of surrender, paradoxically, is what gives you the greatest strength. So the question is, where have you placed your trust? What are you relying on to save you? If it is something fragile, something temporary, something that can be taken from you, then you are standing on unsteady ground. And when the storms come, as they inevitably do, you will fall. But if your foundation is in something greater, in something that does not move, then no matter what happens, you will not be destroyed. Because when your salvation is secure, you can face whatever comes. You can stand firm in the midst of chaos. You can walk through the darkest valleys without fear. And that is not just about eternity. That is about right now. Strength is not just about physical power. It is about resilience, about endurance, about the ability to withstand the weight of existence without collapsing under it. When the psalmist declares, "The Lord is the strength of my life," he is making a fundamental claim about where true stability comes from. Because life is hard. It is full of suffering, full of challenges that will test every part of who you are. And the question is, what happens when you reach your limit? What happens when your own strength isn't enough? Human beings are fragile. We are finite. We get tired. We get overwhelmed. We carry burdens that are sometimes too heavy for us. And when we try to bear them alone, we break. This is something people don't like to admit. There's a common cultural narrative that tells us we have to be self-sufficient, that we have to be strong on our own, that we shouldn't need anything outside of ourselves. But that's a dangerous illusion. No one is strong enough in and of themselves to carry the full weight of life indefinitely. You see this play out all the time. People push themselves until they burn out. They take on more than they can handle because they think they have to prove something to themselves, to others, to the world. And when they inevitably collapse under the pressure, they don't know what to do. Some people spiral into anxiety. Others become bitter and resentful. Some distract themselves with short-term pleasures, trying to numb the pain of their exhaustion. And others just give up entirely, deciding that if life is this hard, it's not worth the effort. This is why the idea of strength beyond the self is so critical. If you rely only on your own power, you will run out of it. If you believe that your will alone is enough to sustain you, eventually you will discover the limits of that belief. Because hardship is coming. If it hasn't already, it will. The loss of a job, the breakdown of a relationship, the betrayal of a friend, the weight of responsibility. These things will come. And when they do, if you do not have a source of strength outside of yourself, you will fall apart. But the psalmist's words offer a different perspective. The Lord is the strength of my life. This means that strength is not something you have to generate entirely on your own. It means there is a foundation that does not weaken, a power that does not run out, a support system that does not collapse under pressure. And when your own strength fails, as it inevitably will, this strength remains. This is not about weakness, quite the opposite. Recognizing that you need a greater strength is not a sign of failure, it is a sign of wisdom. It is the acknowledgement of reality, because to be human is to be limited. But that limitation does not have to mean destruction. Instead, it can lead to something even greater. An understanding that real strength is not just about trying harder, but about anchoring yourself in something that does not fail. Consider what happens when someone lifts a heavy weight with the wrong form. They may be strong, but if their foundation is weak, they will injure themselves. The same is true for life. Strength without the right foundation leads to collapse. People try to carry their struggles with sheer determination, with brute force, thinking they can muscle their way through anything. But if their foundation is weak, if they are relying on themselves alone, they will eventually break. So what does it mean to draw strength from something greater than yourself? It means that when you wake up in the morning, you are not just trying to survive the day on your own. It means that when hardship comes, you don't immediately descend into despair, because you know your ability to endure is not dependent on your own finite resources. It means that when you feel exhausted, when you feel overwhelmed, you do not see that as the end, but as the moment when real strength begins. This is a radical shift in perspective, because the common belief is that strength is about control. If you can control your environment, if you can control your emotions, if you can control the people around you, then you will be strong. But that's a mistake. The truth is, the strongest people are not those who try to control everything. They are those who know how to endure when things are out of their control. They are those who have learned to stand firm, even when the ground beneath them is shaking. And this kind of strength is not just about surviving suffering. It is about transcending it. It is about becoming someone who does not crumble under pressure, someone who can face the challenges of life with courage rather than fear. This is the kind of strength that allows people to keep moving forward when everything inside them is telling them to quit. It is the kind of strength that allows people to take responsibility for their lives, to carry their burdens with dignity, to refuse to be defined by their struggles. And this strength is available. It is not something reserved for a select few. It is not something that requires extraordinary talent or intelligence or status. It is something that comes from recognizing that you do not have to carry everything on your own, that you were never meant to, that there is a greater strength available to you, one that does not diminish, one that does not fade, one that remains firm no matter how difficult life becomes, because life will be difficult. There is no escaping that. But if your strength comes from the right place, you will not be overcome. You will not be broken. You will stand. And in standing, you will become someone who is truly strong. Not because you never fall, but because you know where to turn when you do. Fear is a powerful force. It shapes people's lives in ways they don't even realize. It dictates their decisions, their relationships, their ambitions, or lack thereof. Fear keeps people small, keeps them from stepping forward, keeps them from taking on the necessary burdens of life. And yet the psalmist declares, "Whom shall I fear?" That is not just a rhetorical question. That is a challenge to the very nature of fear itself. Because fear is real. It is not just a feeling. It is a physiological, psychological, and even spiritual response to the unknown. It is what happens when you are faced with something beyond your ability to immediately control or understand. Fear tells you that you are vulnerable, that you are insufficient, that you are at risk. And to a certain extent, fear has a function. It is what keeps people from walking off cliffs, from touching fire, from making reckless decisions that could lead to destruction. But fear that is unchecked, fear that is misdirected, fear that takes over your life, that is something entirely different. People are afraid of many things. They are afraid of failure, afraid of rejection, afraid of loss, afraid of stepping outside the safety of the familiar. They are afraid of taking responsibility because what if they are not strong enough? They are afraid of speaking the truth because what if others turn against them? They are afraid of suffering, of hardship, of the unknown, and so they retreat. They play small, they avoid risk, and in doing so they shrink. Their potential is never realized because they never even allow themselves to step toward it. But the psalmist asks, "Whom shall I fear?" That is not a denial of fear's existence. That is a reorientation. That is the recognition that there is something greater than fear, something that renders fear powerless. And when that realization takes root, fear no longer has the ability to control. Consider what happens when you live in a state of fear. You become defensive. You make decisions based on avoidance rather than growth. You become hyper aware of what could go wrong, and in doing so you become paralyzed. People who live in fear are not living, they are merely surviving. They're constantly calculating risks, constantly retreating from anything that might cause discomfort, constantly searching for the safest, easiest path. And in doing so, they forfeit the very thing that makes life meaningful. Because meaning is not found in avoidance. It is found in confrontation. It is found in stepping toward what is difficult, in taking on challenges despite the risk, in doing what is right even when there is a cost. That is where transformation happens. That is where strength is forged. And if fear is what holds you back from that, then fear itself must be put into proper perspective. So whom shall I fear? If your foundation is solid, if your strength is not dependent on your own fragile abilities but on something greater, then what is there to fear? This does not mean that challenges disappear. It does not mean that suffering ceases. But it does mean that fear no longer dictates your life, because you are standing on something that does not move. This is not just about feeling brave. It is about embodying courage, which is something far deeper than mere bravado. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward despite it. And the people who transform their lives, the people who make an impact, the people who do what is meaningful rather than what is easy, they are the ones who have learned to face fear and refuse to be governed by it. But here's the problem. Most people don't do this. Most people let fear dictate their choices. They avoid confrontation. They stay silent when they should speak. They back down when they should stand firm. And with each avoidance, with each retreat, their fear grows stronger. It does not dissipate, it expands, because fear feeds on avoidance. The more you let it control you, the more power it gains. This is why fear must be confronted. It must be met head on. It must be put into perspective. And that perspective is this. Fear is not the highest authority. It does not get to have the final say. It does not get to determine the course of your life. So whom shall I fear? Not failure, not suffering, not rejection, not hardship, because those things, while difficult, do not have ultimate power. And when you live with that understanding, you become dangerous. Not in a harmful way, but in a way that makes you unstoppable. You become the kind of person who moves forward regardless of difficulty, who refuses to be controlled by fear, who embraces the full weight of responsibility and meaning without hesitation. And that is the kind of person who changes the world. Not the one who hides, not the one who plays it safe, but the one who steps forward when stepping forward is difficult. The one who stands firm when everything around them is shaking. The one who, instead of shrinking in fear, declares boldly, "Whom shall I fear?" and then moves forward anyway. Confidence is a rare thing. Real confidence, that is, not the kind that is performative, not the kind that is based on arrogance or bravado, but the kind that is rooted in something deeper, something unshakable. When the psalmist says, "My heart shall not fear," he is making a profound statement about the nature of courage, about what it means to stand firm even when everything around you is uncertain. And that is something worth thinking about seriously, because life is uncertain, it is unpredictable, it is full of difficulties, full of moments that test your resolve, full of situations where fear seems like the most logical response, and many people live in a constant state of anxiety because of this. They are always looking over their shoulder, always expecting something to go wrong, always waiting for the next disaster. They are controlled by their fear, and as a result, they never truly live. But the psalmist takes a different approach. He does not say there is nothing to be afraid of. He does not pretend that danger does not exist. Instead, he makes a choice. My heart shall not fear. That is not an emotional reaction. That is a decision. It is a declaration of how he will respond to whatever comes his way, and that is where real confidence begins. Not in the absence of fear, but in the refusal to let fear dictate your actions. This kind of confidence does not come from ignorance. It does not come from pretending that everything is fine when it is not. It comes from understanding something deeper, something that makes fear powerless. Because if your confidence is based on your circumstances, you will always be unstable. You will always be shifting, always adjusting, always wondering whether or not you are truly secure. And that is a dangerous place to be. Many people try to manufacture confidence. They tell themselves to think positively. They surround themselves with affirmations, with motivational slogans, with temporary boosts of self-esteem. But none of that lasts. Because as soon as difficulty comes, as soon as something unexpected happens, all of that artificial confidence crumbles. That is why so many people seem outwardly strong but fall apart under pressure. Their confidence was built on something weak, on their own abilities, on their own plans, on their own illusions of control. And when those things fail, they are left with nothing. But the psalmist does not place his confidence in himself. That is why he can say, "My heart shall not fear," because his confidence is built on something immovable. And that is what makes the difference. Imagine walking into a battle without fear. Not because the battle is easy, not because you are stronger than your enemies, but because you know that no matter what happens, you will not be overcome. That is a different kind of confidence. That is the confidence of someone who is anchored in something beyond themselves. And when you have that, fear loses its grip on you. But how many people actually live like this? How many people face challenges with the firm belief that they will not be shaken? Very few. Because most people are still relying on their own strength. They still believe that if they just try hard enough, if they just prepare well enough, if they just avoid making mistakes, then they will be okay. But life does not work that way. No amount of preparation can eliminate all uncertainty. No amount of effort can remove every risk. And when people finally realize this, when they see that their control is limited, their confidence crumbles. So what is the alternative? It is to adopt the same mindset as the psalmist. To recognize that fear is a choice. That confidence is not about eliminating risk, but about standing firm in the face of it. That security does not come from external circumstances, but from something deeper, something that does not change. And this kind of confidence is not just about feeling better. It is about becoming someone who can endure hardship without breaking. It is about being the kind of person who does not collapse under pressure, who does not give in to despair, who does not allow fear to dictate their life. It is about living with strength, with clarity, with the unwavering belief that no matter what happens, you will not be destroyed. And that kind of confidence changes everything. It allows you to take risks. It allows you to step forward when others hesitate. It allows you to face challenges with the certainty that you are standing on solid ground. And when you live that way, fear no longer controls you. It no longer dictates your decisions. It no longer keeps you from becoming who you were meant to be. So the question is, where is your confidence rooted? If it is in yourself, in your plans, in your ability to control the world around you, then it is fragile. It can be taken from you in an instant. But if it is built on something greater, then you will stand firm, even in difficulty, even in uncertainty, even in the face of fear itself. Because fear will come. It always does. But when you have real confidence, when you have the kind of strength that does not depend on circumstances, then you can look fear in the face and say, "My heart shall not fear." And that is the kind of confidence that cannot be shaken.